What's up, kiddos? Captain Planet here. Hey, this video was inspired by a girl's named Stella. She had a question. Her mom, Tiffany Bright, said that Stella wanted to ask me what my favorite estuary creature is. And man, is there a bunch of them. But first, we need to kind of cover about what an estuary really is, okay? Because a lot of times, and I think the statistic is 70% of Americans visit an estuary every year, but I think maybe only 10% of us even realize that we're in one. You know, um, the mangrove forests are an estuary, the seagrass beds are an estuary, um, the beaches can even be an estuary. All these different things. Saltwater marshes are an estuary. These different types of estuaries. Okay, so an estuary is where usually the river meets the ocean. Okay, and that's our most common sense approach as far as an estuary. That's what we would call a coastal plain estuary, where the river meets the ocean. So you have fresh water coming out from the river, but then you also have it meeting the ocean, which is salt water. So you get this combination of fresh water and salt water, and this is called brackish water. All right. So this brackish water enables different things to thrive, like different kinds of plankton, different kinds of little algae, and this gives a food source to all of my homies who live in estuaries. I'm gonna tell you at the end of the video what I think my favorite estuary creature is, as long as I don't let this mustache hair keep crawling up into my nose. I got something tickling me. But I'm going to let you know what my favorite estuary creatures are at the end. But first, I want to cover what these estuaries are themselves. They are nurseries for the ocean, okay, guys? So, you know how yesterday I did the video about parrotfish? So, get this. When parrotfish are young, they live in the mangroves, which is a type of estuary, the mangrove forest. Even things like the snappers and different kinds of fish that you may be used to seeing at a reef, like the parrotfish, because they eat coral as they get older. They actually spend a good portion of their lives as their children, little children fish, in those mangrove forests because it helps keep them protected. So if you've ever seen a mangrove forest, like all these roots come down like my fingers and they intertwine like this. And in all these little places, it makes it to where there's really good hiding spots for fish to swim around. That way, smaller fish can hide in a structure like this, like a baby parrotfish or a baby snapper. But then a bull shark can't exactly get to it because it's in those tiny little crevices of the roots. So believe it or not, 70% of America's commercial fish catch comes in an estuary at some point in its life. 80 to 90% of America's recreational fish catch, that fish spends a portion of its life in an estuary. So believe it or not, guys, this is like the real Magic Kingdom, okay? Believe it or not, per square inch, pound for pound, if you measured it, you would find more life in an estuary per square inch than you would in any forest, like a rainforest, for example. So imagine that. When you think of biodiversity, your mind usually goes to the Amazon rainforest, or if you're an ocean guy too, you always think, of a reef, a coral reef. These are two places where you see awesome biodiversity. But believe it or not, inch per inch, there is more life right there in those estuaries than anywhere else. It's just amazing. So think about that, guys. It really is like the real Magic Kingdom. Okay? So these also serve a great purpose for us, not only for our 70% of commercial fish catch and 90%, 80 to 90% of recreational fish catch. But think about this. Estuaries also help stop pollution, because these estuaries actually catch sediment and nutrients that those plants in that estuary need to grow, and they filter out that nutrient pollution that sometimes us humans can be causing ourselves, especially here in Florida. So those mangroves or that seagrass or the salt marsh, all these different estuary ecology situations, they help filter out that sediment and they help filter out that nutrient. So they're helping to stop pollution before that water gets to the ocean, right? And not only that, but they help as storm surges. And what this means is they lower the risk of flooding for us humans, because let's face it, floods are the worst to the human species than probably any species, because we are the only species that loves to just build our homes in floodplains. um, but think about it. When you see a big wave coming, when it hits those mangrove forests or the seagrass, different things like that, it can help act as a storm surge and lessen the impact of those waves. So they serve all kinds of things. So you have 4 different kinds of estuaries. And it's really not that simple, because there's different kinds of different kinds and the different kinds. But for the most part, you have a coastal plain estuary, which is the most common that we think of. Where the river meets the sea. Tampa Bay, okay, or where I live in Charlotte Harbor. Those are great examples of a coastal plain estuary. And then you also have things like bar-built estuaries. Okay, let's have that for number 2. Bar-built estuaries are when there's a sandbar that's created, and sometimes that sandbar can even turn into an island later on. And some of you might be thinking barrier islands in Florida, like Longboat Key, Casey Key on the west coast, or Hutchison Island and things like that on the east coast. These are examples of bar-built estuaries, which would be number 2 out of the 4. So these bar-built estuaries, they're basically have been built by a sandbar or different kind of barrier island like that, and that's what keeps that ocean from the fresh water. You guys will call this region the intercoastal. Okay, so that's an example of a bar-built estuary. And then you have a fjord estuary. It's kind of a fjord, it's a weird little word. It's spelled Fjord, so nobody would probably even attempt to pronounce it if they hadn't heard it before. It's fjord. But fjord, that is produced by glaciers, okay, that kind of estuary, a fjord estuary. So fjord estuaries are typically going to be very narrow and very steep, like mountainy, and very long, because they're created by glaciers. And then the 4th type of estuary is what we call a tectonic estuary. So this is when the ocean begins to take up that space where the earth is actually falling in to the sea, due to tectonic plate movement. People probably like, I doubt that's very common, but here's one that, let's use San Francisco Bay. That would be an excellent example of a tectonic estuary, guys. San Francisco Bay. If you don't know what's happening with the earth around you, you just might assume that that's actually a coastal plain estuary, no different than Tampa Bay, thanks San Francisco Bay. But what's actually happening with the earth and the tectonic plates shifting, that's actually making that a tectonic estuary. So those are your 4 different kinds. So now, the grand finale. What is my favorite estuary creature? I definitely have to say the echinoderms, which are sea stars, sea urchins, cucumbers, I think that these are just incredible critters because they have no brains, they have no hearts, they have no lungs, yet they can do all these different things. A sea star can even lose one of its legs, and that leg can grow four more legs and turn into another sea star. So they can actually genetic clone. And the sea star is who the scientists studied a lot to figure out genetic cloning for humans, where we could grow body parts for humans. So let's say a grandpa needs a new heart, but because he's old, he's last in line. Well, that's not fair to his granddaughter. Maybe if he could just get some blood drawn and come in a week later and they've grown his new heart because of what we've learned from this sea star, that'd be pretty cool. Now, I bet your mind's going, what? I think that we should just make a whole separate video about the echinoderm so I can really dive into this because it's something worth knowing. Trust me, kids. Remember, kiddos, you can leave a comment and ask your parents to leave a comment and tell me what you want to know. Maybe it's something as simple as someone said dolphins. One kid had a really cool question. Was like, how come freshwater, or how come the water on land is freshwater, but the water in the ocean is salt water? Why is that? Someone asked how the moon affects the ocean. So we're going to be talking about tides and different things. I've been getting all kinds of great questions from you kids. Somebody even asked about bioluminescence. You talk about something cool. We're going to be diving into all kinds of awesome ocean-related topics. That way you guys can stay engaged while you're not in school. Because, hey, education doesn't stop when school stops. Don't ever think that, guys. I got smart because I always want to learn. And even at 36, I still want to keep learning. I'm always learning. Education is not the memorization of facts, okay? It's the training of the mind to think. Albert Einstein said that. Love you, kids. Have a great day. We're going to go live later to talk about this in a little bit more in depth if you want to go and want to come and engage. Sorry, I'm slurring my speech now. See you, dudes.